On this March 7th, 2024 meeting of the AMAS Technical Advisory Committee order. It is 1:01 p.m. Aaron, can you do the roll call for us?
Yes, Brandon DeMood. Yem Yalini.
Present.
Matt Stitchick. Steve Rebuffo. He's online. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm present. I was having a heck of a time unmuting.
Okay. Luke Bowen. Here. Ben White. Here. Brad Coy.
Here.
Melinda Kohlhaas.
Here.
Jamie Acton is gone. Craig Lyon.
Present.
And Taylor Keegan. Thank you. You have quorum.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Can you do the public involvement announcement as well?
Of course, I would love to do that. AMAT's committee meetings are open to the public, and the public is provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by a staff or consultant. After the committee discusses the business item, the public is invited to formally comment. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you are joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn your camera off when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Next on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for approving the agenda?
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Alimi, second by Mr. Boland. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
There is one change. I forgot to add an item on there, project and plan update, Fireweed Lane rehabilitation. I reached out to everybody to ask for this and then completely forgot to put it on the agenda. So I ask that you please add it under 6B for project and plan updates.
Okay, so Fireweed Lane.
Rehabilitation.
Okay, would someone like to make an amendment to the agenda? Okay, moved by Mr. Boland, second by Mr. White, to add Fireweed Lane rehabilitation as 6B. All right? Okay, are there any objections to making that amendment? Okay, hearing none. That amendment is included. Any other changes? Okay, are there any objections to approving the minutes as amended? Sorry, not the minutes, to approving the agenda as amended. Okay, hearing no objections, the agenda is approved as amended. We will now move to the meeting minutes. We have our February 1st, 2024 minutes before us. Do we have any motion for approving the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyon, seconded by Mr. Keegan. Do we have any changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing no changes, are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, the February 1st, 2024 minutes are approved. Okay, moving right along, let's jump into action item 5A. The AMAS safety plan. Is that one?
That'll be me. And then I'm checking to see. We have a full house. Jeannie is here to help answer questions on it. So I'll go ahead and start and see how we go from there.
Okay, good way.
Yeah, everybody, thank you very much. So before you use the AMAT safety plan. So we did have a work session on this with the committees, the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Committee on February 21st. To give an overview of the plan and to provide an opportunity for the committee members to ask questions or provide any feedback. We did get feedback from that and we did update the plan based on that feedback. So it's before you today. So we started work on this plan back in March of 2023, contracting the consultants of Burgess and Nyepel, Fear and Peers, and R&M Consultants Incorporated. Joni Wilm was the project manager at the time, so I'd like to thank Joni for her effort on this. She did a really good job getting it started and it's really appreciated, but she has moved on to bigger and better things. So we're just kind of finishing up after she did her work. So we did have 3 stakeholder meetings and a half-day public open house. plus presentations to the AMATS committees. And there was a public survey where 444 people responded. One thing to remember about this safety plan is it's a little different from previous type of plans that AMATS have done. We are using the safe systems approach, which is a federally recognized approach to looking at the transportation system. And it's in the actual document itself about what kind of the safe systems approach is. And it's looking at these kind of 5 different aspects, you know, safe road users, safe vehicles, post-crash care, safe roads, and safe speeds. And how responsibility is shared, safety is proactive, and all these other kind of things. So it's really kind of taking a more aggressive, in a positive way, approach to safety and being more forefront about it. So a lot of work was put into this. The plan itself has a number of different exciting things in here, including priority locations, and then countermeasures that can be used to help address and prevent key collisions in locations throughout the system. One good thing about this plan, another good thing I should say, is since it is following the safe systems approach, it is making AMATS, the municipality of Anchorage, and the Department of Transportation within our boundary eligible for the safe grants for all grant program that is Safe Streets for All. Thank you. So many different acronyms to follow. And so what this means is that grant program is out and available right now. And once this plan is approved, the different agencies will be eligible to put in grant applications for that. I think various agencies are looking at that moving forward, so AMATS can help assist wherever. I did find out recently from Mr. Lyon, who just got back from DC, that AMATS is one of the first in the country to have a safety plan in place that makes us eligible for the Safe Streets for All grant. Well, I don't think we're the only one, but we are ahead of the curve on this one. So I would like to thank everybody for their effort. It's exciting times for AMATS. Yeah, there's a lot about this plan. So it's before you today for final review and recommendation for approval to the AMATS Policy Committee. So I'm here to help answer questions. Jeannie is here to help answer questions. And I don't know if is Juan on? Yeah. Okay. And then Juan with RNN is also online to help answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments from the committee?
Nothing except to say, I know there's a lot of work put into this, and it's a really good plan. I really like the way it looks. A lot of good information. And as Aaron mentioned, we are, when this is adopted, hopefully next in 2 weeks by the policy committee, will be one of the earliest adopters in the country for MPOs for these. And you have to have this plan in place in order to apply for these Safe Streets for All grants. So we'll be early on for the SS4A, and we have a lot of opportunities for PM&E or parks or planning department, et cetera, for applying for these. So we're in a good place.
Okay, thanks, Craig. I had to miss the work session, but I did have staff go in my place. And one of the things that we did note is that the countermeasures that were added versus the original draft, we do really like that it's open the way for all those various different countermeasures. So we do appreciate that change for the project team. I have noticed on page 18, I have a question or two. The safety programs that are listed, it talks about the municipality traffic safety committee. And I'm not sure what that's referring to. So I know that there's a school transportation committee that maybe this was getting confused a little bit with, but I hate to have this say something that's not really happening there. So I'm curious what can be said on that.
Yeah, Jeannie, can you help answer or?
Juan or Taylor.
Okay, Juan or Taylor, can one of you help answer the question? I don't know if you heard it, but there's a question under the safety programs. It says Municipality Traffic Safety Committee meets regularly, and there's a question because they're not sure what that means. or who that is, if that exists.
Hi, this is Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I will follow up with Nicole about that. Could be just a wording error and we can correct that, but I'll follow up.
So the simplest thing, if we do need to make any adjustments today as part of this, should be just to delete that line. Because it either, in my mind, is the school related one, or it needs to be crossed out. And then the one other minor adjustment would be to add the one that has a traffic calming program is in place, to add a neighborhood traffic calming program. Just because I know that there's been a lot of discussions about arterial traffic calming and those sorts of things, which this only gets on the neighborhood streets. So that would be a. By going through it, it looks great. Those are the two things that kind of stood out. I didn't have a chance at the work session to comment about.
Okay, we'll look at that. There's also one I'll mention that I thought we added, but we'll have to follow up. HSIP needs to be listed on here. The Highway Safety Improvement Program is a critical program. So we want to make sure that we call it out. I don't see it on there, but we'll make sure to add that.
And yeah, that's on page 17, but we can update that language to be neighborhood traffic calming program. And yeah, the HSIP is just one page above that under plans reviewed, but we can include it also in the safety programs too.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds great. Are those changes that we need to like include in like amendment language as we forward this on for recommendation, or just talking about them, is that sufficient?
It would be nice if we could get some kind of thing. We're not at that stage right now because we're just asking questions, but when we get to that, it would be nice if that could be an amendment. So it's on the record of what you would like staff to do.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from me?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, go ahead, Linda.
I just want to say I'm impressed with the timing of starting it and this project, this plan in March 2023 and wrapping it up a year later. That's a very swift schedule that they met in the timeline. So kudos to AMAT staff and the consultant team. I do have a question about that. It says the 3 stakeholder meetings were held.
Mhm.
What type of meetings were those? I'm just curious.
Taylor, can you help answer that?
Yes, I can. So for the stakeholder meetings, the initial meeting we presented on data, we built out a data dashboard. We also presented about what we've heard and some of the key issues, and then what our profiles were for the final meeting, and got some feedback from the stakeholders on that.
Were they agency stakeholders or including the public?
We have a list of all the stakeholders on page 10, and there's quite a number of them: Bike Anchorage, the school district, the Alaska Center for Blind and Visually Impaired. Yep, you can see the list here. People Mover, quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. And then my last comment is PME is really excited about the near completion of this plan, and we are eager to apply for one of the grants on one of those profile projects. So yeah, so nice job, everybody. That's all.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
I did want to mention, sorry, I want to mention something I forgot. So part of what we're going to be looking at as staff on this is future updates of this plan. This will probably be one of our plans we routinely update. We're not sure at the exact time frame. You know, it'd be nice if we could do it every 2 years, but realistically, staff time is pretty limited. So maybe every 4 years, keep it updated, a full robust update like we did this one, and update the data. And, you know, that also gives time for more data to be done, and it takes a while for us to fund and construct a project. So, you know, doing it every year is not really realistic, but we don't want it to languish and be 10 years down the road, and we remember that we have to suddenly update it. So, If you have any recommendations on how often you think it should be updated, let us know and we'll see what we can get done.
Sounds good, thanks, Aaron. I think as we do Safe Streets for All grant, that might make it more clear if it's getting to where we might need another one. So,
Okay.
so yeah, don't have thoughts right now on that yet, but I think as we go through the next few grant cycles, should become more clear.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, let's move then to the public. Are there any comments from the public? Anybody in the room with the comments? I don't see anyone on the chat.
Hi there. Sorry, I was trying to get to the right screen to make a comment. Is that still possible?
Yeah, for sure. So state your name. You'll have 3 minutes to provide your comment. We'll be happy to hear that.
Okay, my name is Sarah Davenport and I live in Eagle River. And I'm just here today to urge you to support spending some money in Eagle River. We've got so many Anchorage Bowl projects going on. And which I appreciate. I love using the trails there and everything. But we have projects in Eagle River that have been on the books for a very long time. Specifically the Eagle River Road extension of the multi-use pathway. That's really important to our community. It's been designed for a long time and it just keeps getting more and more expensive as we push it out year after year. So I would like to propose that you use some critical thinking, maybe some problem solving and break it down. There was a illustrative option of just doing some pathway, and that's fine. We're okay with that because something is better than nothing. We can't let it just simmer for another decade. So I'd like to get some funding to Eagle River and specifically get that pathway underway.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Sarah. Appreciate it. Are there any other comments from the public? Okay, looks like I see someone online with their hand raised. Is that Mark?
This is Mark. This is Mark Eisman, the Anchorage area planner. I just wanted to point out a clarification. I think it was implied, but the Safe Streets for All grant has lots of different components in it, including planning and demonstration grants. But now that we have a safety plan in place, or soon to be in place, that allows us to go for those implementation grants, which I know that Aaron and Melinda were kind of talking about, which is great. But it also allows us to go back and potentially revise the safety plan too in the future. So I just wanted to point that out, that this plan actually lets us go for those constructional, like to actually take some of those actionable items in the plan and go for actually implementing that kind of stuff, which is great. So it's great to see this finally come to fruition.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Mark, for clarifying. That was what someone was referring to. It's always good for someone out in the public. Here's what we're talking about, providing clarification. Because we might not have been clear. So thanks for that. Any other comments from the public? Okay, looks like I don't see any more. So what is the
Real quick before you move on, Matt Stitchick has joined us.
Oh, okay. Let the record show Matt Stickich is showing us. I see 120 right now on my log. Yeah, so let the record show that. Let's see. So what is the will of the committee with regards to this?
I'll move to recommend for approval to the policy committee, the safety plan, the AMAT safety plan.
Okay, moved by Ms. Fullhouse,
Second.
seconded by Mr. White. Yeah. So let's see, so there was the discussion on page 18 to make some changes. I think it probably just makes sense to strike the municipality traffic safety committee meets regularly and change the traffic calming and safe neighborhood plan just to clarify that.
I'd personally like to wait to hear from Nicole Waldheim, who was managing the project, to see if there was a specific committee that she had in mind so that we know that. My guess is probably that Safe Streets policy that, or a committee that you and I are go to all the time. So I'd like to wait to hear for that. But I think since it goes to the policy committee in 2 weeks, we can get that answer before then, and Aaron can take care of providing it there. So we have the right one there. If we have, I think there is a committee that meets regularly. It'd be nice to have it reflected.
So if we provided a list of suggested edits for the policy committee to consider and didn't make them yet, but just provided it.
Yeah.
That seems.
Yeah, so we technically wouldn't make any edits to the document. We would just forward your guys' recommendations to the policy committee. And with this one, part of it would be, what is this supposed to be, and provide that to the policy. TAC had a question about what this was, staff reviewed it, and here's the answer. And then the policy committee decides what they want to do.
Okay. So, someone want to verbalize then what the amendment would be to be able to provide that feedback to the policy committee? Should I explain it? Somebody can then make the motions.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would request a motion be made by a member of the committee to provide a list to the policy committee of the research by the project team explanation regarding the municipality traffic safety committee meets regularly for it. And then also to adjust the traffic calming program to include neighborhood for it. And then also add the HSIP program to the list. Okay. Thanks, Keegan. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's Ms. Fullhouse. So moved by Ms. Keegan, second by Ms. Fullhouse to make the changes as mentioned previously. Do we have any objections to that amendment? We hearing none, that amendment is then passed. Are there any other amendments that we want to consider this time? Okay, then, we can move on. The motion is already on the floor to recommend approval by the policy committee as amended. Are there any objections to approving the motion as amended? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. So, thank you for the project team for all your effort on this. I'm excited for the implementation part especially. And it comes at a very timely manner for that. So, thank you. Okay, let's move on then to the next item on the agenda, item 5B, AMAT's comments on Seward Highway to Glen Highway L.
And of course, I will be the one doing this. Okay, everybody. So as you know, AMAT's funded a Seward Highway to Glen Highway PEL a number of years ago. $5 million was set aside for this project. It's been underway for a few years. The team finally released a set of alternatives for feedback. There was a public meeting recently where they actually had the alternatives available in nice graphical format for the public and other people to come see them and everything. After that meeting, AMAT's staff got together and decided to put these comments together because we had some concerns from what we saw on those alternatives. So there are 9 concerns in our letter here. So I just kind of wanted to go through those concerns really quickly so you know what they are. And then we'll have opportunity for comments, questions, and feedback stuff and edits and all that kind of stuff. So, first, we do want to say thank you to the project team very much. It's been working closely with AMATs over the years. And so we want people to understand that these comments are being made because it's part of our job as AMAT staff to oversee transportation planning within our area and to give feedback based on what we do as part of our long-range plan for the MTP and our short-range plan for the TIP. So I don't want anyone to take these comments personally. It's just part of the process. So the first overall feedback is that the draft alternatives do not appear to address the concerns raised by the community nor solve many of the problems that have been raised as part of the plan development. We're saying, in fact, they appear to make local connectivity worse when you look at some of the options. For example, one option is putting a number of cul-de-sacs along Hyder, which is, very problematic for connectivity for active transportation users as well as motorized users. And instead, what the project should have included at the very beginning was an analysis of the 2050 MTP projects, which have been out there for a while now, so they're not brand new or hidden, to see what those impacts would have and what benefits they would have on the area. Part of a PEL's job is to provide different options, potentially innovative options for the public, for stakeholders, agencies to look at and provide comments on. And second issue, alternatives do not seem to match up with the purpose and need. One of the things about the purpose and need is it talks about local connectivity and mobility. When you look at the alternatives, they're very focused on regional connectivity. That's typically what a highway is. If you don't know, all of the alternatives are a highway option, minus one that's called an interim solution, but that didn't have a whole lot of information for it. And when you actually look at the documentation that's provided as part of the project, the system performance report, there doesn't seem to be that much of a concern outside of the Glen Highway for system performance. So, an example is a good part of the shift to LOSF is on the Glen Highway. So we acknowledge that. The LOS is not expected to rise to an unacceptable LOS within most of the study area. So when you take that, you look at that plus the information that's available for vehicle hours of delay, which is almost non-existent over the life of the project for 2050 outside of the Glen Highway, it appears that there's little or no justification for the construction of the highway connection other than to address the concerns on the Glen Highway. Third comment is kind of related to that. Building highways is not really the current best practice for transportation planning. You look nationwide, communities are removing highways because of the impact to the community. There's viaducts, everything. It's all being removed in certain locations, especially when it comes at the cost of disconnecting your communities or impacting underserved populations. Typically they look at TSMO or TDM options as low cost, high impact alternatives. And AMS just recently came out with a TSMO plan, as well as a TDM for the UMED area that could have been looked at. And those options could have also been included as part of the alternatives, which we do address later on as well. So another concern, and I recognize this is a hard one, but we have to say it, there's no funding associated with any of these alternatives. Part of the PEL is to try and give an entire picture for everybody to look at. Even if they are high level funding, basic high level planning estimates, it would be helpful for us as AMATs to know, because we as AMATs have serious concerns about the affordability of the alternatives that are shown. Our MTP through 2050 is fiscally constrained without these highway alternatives. The STIP is having pretty significant concerns showing the available funding to afford anything that they have in there aside from a few projects. So when you see these, it's a little disconcerting because you don't know where the money is going to come from. And related to that, there's a significant amount of infrastructure that's going to be added as part of this project. Highway projects are huge. They require a lot of pavement. I mean, when you look at the alternatives that has all those on and off ramps, it's pretty wild. How are we going to pay for the maintenance of that, both pavement and winter? I don't know if you guys know this, but there is a significant backlog of pavement in our community that we as AMATs are trying to address, and there's limited funding for it. So this just seems to make the problem worse from our perspective as staff. We're concerned that the alternatives don't match up with the goals and objectives for the 2050 MTP for maintaining the existing infrastructure, improving safety and security for all users, not just people who are using the highway, improving access and mobility for all users, promote a healthy environment and advance equity. They also don't match up with the federal aid highway performance of infrastructure condition and environmental sustainability. Seventh one, there's no indication that public transportation was included as part of the alternative analysis. You know, public transportation has to be included in everything that we do, even if it's not something that AMATS funds or DOT funds. It has to be looked at because it is an option that can be used to help address some of the concerns. So our question is, how was future transit accounted for as part of the alternatives development? Was it accounted for? And how was the public transportation department included in the project development process? Eighth one, AMATS as an MPO is required to consider housing. This is a relatively new one, so you'll forgive us for not having everything in place on this. But it would be helpful for us as AMATS to understand the housing impacts and how they'll be mitigated, especially as we're having a pretty significant housing issue in our community. And then the last one is about innovation, which I already kind of touched on for TSMO and CDM. So with that said, AMATS staff, does look forward to continuing to work with the project team. And this letter is before you because AMATS staff won't send it without the TAC and policy committee reviewing it and saying yay or nay to it. So that's why it's before you. So it's an action item for you to look at and to provide your recommendation to the policy committee. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions or comments for the committee?
Do I have to move to approve so I can ask questions? Or can
No.
I just?
No,
move
it's
along?
it's currently time for questions. The move for approval will happen after.
All right. Someone tell me how the boundary for this got created, because I'm a little frustrated that there are other solutions out there. And when I had a meeting with DOT specifically to get the railroad's comments, I found out that those other solutions actually weren't considered because they lie outside the boundary, but through the boundary.
That would be DOT as part of the project team. Galen, I think I saw you, but I don't think you were the one in charge of the project at the time, so.
I wasn't, but we do have, to the chair.
Can you speak to your name?
Yeah, Galen Jones, last name DOT. We have, I believe we have John McPherson, who's the project manager with HDR, who could speak to that, should be on the line. John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. If someone could repeat the question, I wasn't quite sure what the question was.
Who came up with the boundary for consideration of alternatives?
I think what we have for the boundary, we proposed a boundary, we shared it at public meetings and had input on it. I don't think there's any limitation to where alternatives land relative to the boundary, but the study area was kind of set up by the original Pell study description as being between the Seward Highway at Burgaw and 20th Glen Highway at Burgaw and 20th on the Seward Highway. And was to include potential improvements to and from the port, to and from the highway network.
Was the area you were concerned about, Brian? Was it?
Well, what frustrates me is you already have a 4-lane connection between the two. If you take Dowling, Elmore, Martin Luther King, Boniface, you have 4 lanes the entire way. You're meeting AMAT's objectives without disrupting new stuff. And really what you're looking at is a series of intersection improvements and cleaning up, if you really want limited access, cleaning up the street access. It's scalable and it already exists. And if you look closely at the connection up here at Tudor and Elmore, and you look closely at the connection at Tudor and Martin Luther King / Boniface, I don't know where it changes. It also potentially becomes your solution for dealing with the Burgaw Street extension to the university, because suddenly you're taking all that traffic, which literally is a third of it coming from the valley, and pumping it directly to Tudor and in rather than through what clearly the public has a concern about recreational area. And like I said, it's scalable. You're not going to do a $1 billion project, which this thing is probably plus in one thing. You can actually just sort of eat it slowly, a mile or two at a time. And quite frankly, you can probably do a lot to improve it just by intersection improvements on those 5 streets right now. And I brought it up before, and now and when I brought it up on this, I was told it was outside the town.
And so the section you're talking about is Seward Highway.
It's the route that everybody's using now. If you look, just watch traffic going from that side of town to that side of town. It is the main route. Nobody goes downtown. And it's frequently fairly congested, particularly right out here. And it's very heavily used. You already have it. It's already 4-lane the whole way. It is not going to take that much to make it that much better and start to draw the stuff that's coming down the Muldoon and stuff that's coming down Berghoff to it. And you're not going to have to completely disgrace a bunch of communities and wreck a bunch of other recreational areas to do it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Brian, for your comments. Was there other things that you wanted to mention on that? Or?
I'm just frustrated that we've got $5 million to give us $2 billion solutions that, quite frankly, don't meet AMAT's objectives, don't meet our planning documents, and quite frankly, are a fantasy if you ever think you're going to fund it when you look at the other transportation needs of the state. We might as well have just figured out how to build a bridge to the moon. And I'm grumpy today, by the way.
Fair enough. Other questions or comments from the committee?
I guess I'd just like to say, that where we're at in the Pell is still at a very preliminary stage. These are preliminary alternatives that we have here. So kind of talking about process, about how we're advancing through the Pell is, you know, this is our first blush. We don't have cost estimates at this point in time. We haven't done traffic modeling. A lot of that stuff is going to play out, but we want to give the public, stakeholders, everybody an opportunity to provide input to the alternatives that have been thrown out there to see what kind of issues should be addressed. And so I appreciate AMAT's staff taking the time to provide comments here. I guess one of the misconceptions that I see as I was reading this is that it mentions congestion, and that's something we're trying to solve. That isn't something we're trying to solve with the Pell as well moving forward. Really, I think one of the big problems that we see is resolving those local and regional traffic conflicts in the main Grand Gamble area. And so,
Okay, thank you, Luke. Other questions and comments from the committee? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I would be very interested to find out more about the level of service and data-driven need for the project. Also to find out if there is a no-build solution. But I think what I'd like to also emphasize is looking for the TISMO options, broadening the evaluation. Is there an opportunity for something like metered control onto Glen Highway? As I travel on lower 48, I see some of those options on the highway where you actually drive out and they have, you know, red lights metering the oncoming traffic there. So, but I think connectivity is very important, and it goes hand in hand with transit. Something that we've learned for work that PM&E has done for Providence and UMed District is the network of pedestrian facilities are entirely essential in having good access to have a functional transit system for providing safe access for where people need to go is important. So again, I also urge that to be looked at broadly.
I would like to comment too, that the team has looked at transit plans in this area, and that's absolutely something that we see as an important aspect of whatever recommendations come out of the ballot. So as we're looking at preliminary alternatives, there's still a lot of time to refine where transit would go in any one of these scenarios. Also, to the way that I see this belt playing out, it wouldn't be one alternative for this area. It would be a series of projects that would be coming out that would help address different problems in different areas, trying to balance the needs of all users in this area.
That's all I had.
Gail, you mentioned something on the no-build alternative, but we were actually looking at two no-builds, and I believe one of them is just a no-build as it's right now, and then one of them, I think, did take into account the 2015 without any of the recommendations, but
Yeah, I can speak to that.
guess what?
Sure, Galen Jones, Alaska DOT. So we're showing these 7 build alternatives, but there's also 2 no action alternatives that part of the build process we're required to look at. So one of the no action alternatives takes all of the MTP projects, assumes they're built. It looks at a 2050 year horizon, but it assumes no projects are being built on Ingram Gamble. So no build on Ingram Gamble, everything else is built out for the MTP 2050. Second no action alternative is a modification of that by simply adding the road diet projects from the MTP 2050 on Ingram Gamble. So all of the MTP 2050 projects within the study area. So we'll get a really good opportunity to see, okay, if we don't do anything at all on Ingram Gamble, what's that going to look like in different horizon years all the way out to 2050? But if we do perform the road diets per the MTP 2050, which includes dropping a lane on each of those roads, Ingram Gamble remain a couplet, still have all the same traffic going through there. What does that look like from a traffic performance perspective in the study area? Does it push traffic in on the roads we don't want extra traffic on? What does it do to the network?
So I'll follow up on that. I think there's a misunderstanding of what a no build is and what a build is. What Galen just described is an alternative, an actual build alternative. That instead of doing the highway, you do these other options. So you called it a no build, but that's not what it is. A no build is you don't build anything. You can't call it a no build and then say, oh, but we are going to build all these projects out through 2050 to see what they do to the network. That's an alternative. And that's what's missing from here. The only alternatives are highway alternatives. And our community has repeatedly asked, I am constantly beaten upon by people that all we do as AMATs is look at highways. And then what do I say? Oh yeah, you're right. That's all we do. When I have to stand up in front of the assembly and they yell at me for that, what am I supposed to do? So when you guys are looking at these, stop thinking that it's only highways we can build. Don't be like, well, we'll look at these alternatives later. No, look at them in the first go. You should look at the 2050 MTPs as an project, as an option for an alternative, not a no build alternative. Call it an alternative. And if it doesn't work, great. We know that information. Then we have other things we can look at as well. I think there's kind of this weird misunderstanding about what a PEL is supposed to be doing. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Brad, I see John has his hand up. I don't know if that's before or now.
Okay, are you gonna respond to some of the comments and questions, John?
If I'm able to, yes. One, maybe Galen gave it a slight misnomer. It's, what we are looking at as one of the alternatives. It is a build alternative and it is what's in the MTP. So part of the letter suggests we should look at the projects in the MTP, and that is one of the build alternatives that we're evaluating. So I just wanted to make that clear. Second, there seems to be a little bit of confusion about the purpose and need and the level of service. We do have some reports out there. And as was mentioned, congestion isn't really the problem here. What we have is a historical transportation system where we have a Glen Highway and a Seward Highway that come into Anchorage. We're not just simply trying to connect the two highways together someplace. We're trying to get people where they need to go. And what we did in the past was we dumped all of the highway traffic onto a surface set of couplets right through the middle of Fairview. And Fairview's carried that burden of that traffic for 50 or 60 years. And there's a lot of conflict. So there's safety problems there. There's plans for Main Street and reconstructing Ingress Street and doing these road diet projects. And the Anchorage Land Use Plan map has a vision for this area that is in conflict with a surface set of couplets. So how do we balance, the regional travel needs? People need to get downtown, they need to get to Midtown, they need to get to the port, they need to get to the airport. And right now we've routed them all through Fairview. So we have a system of alternatives to try to separate some of those functions where we try to put regional traffic somewhere and make a place where we can have local traffic and local connections. And we either do that by trenching, and that was the alternative that was in the previous MTP. It's the alternative that is supported by the Fairview Neighborhood Plan that's adopted, or we try to bypass that neighborhood and separate some of those uses by going south of Merrill Field. So I think we have a range of alternatives. I think if we say we're going to do, if we want to select the do nothing alternative or the MTP alternative, we can, we're going to be evaluating those impacts, evaluating the costs of all of these. If we end up choosing that, then what we're saying is that traffic will continue to be in Fairview. So that's really the gist of what we're trying to do. It's not trying to solve a congestion problem because that's not what we're seeing. But there is a lot of conflict between uses, between regional travel and the local travel there. And that's what the alternatives are trying to solve.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, how about from the public? Are there any comments that the public would like to make? Is anybody in the room? Anyone online? Feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you 3 minutes. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody online yet either. So that moves into any actions that the committee wants to take. So the focus right now then is this letter that staff provided. And there's not a memo that I saw with this. So what is it? What are the potential motions that you're looking for us to recommend to the policy committee?
Yeah, provide any feedback on the letter for the policy committee to review when they see it in a couple weeks.
Okay, so recommend it to them and provide.
Yeah, or recommended edits, don't recommend it to them. Typically, you have to make a motion in the positive. But if there's a desire that, they don't feel that this letter should go forward, that could be part of it, something like that.
Yeah, perfect. So what is the will of the committee in regards to this item?
Anybody?
Is there an opportunity for the project team with HDR's assistance to provide their perspective in response to this? Or when could that happen? Or would it be outside of the TAC and the policy?
It'd probably be after the letter's sent, because technically it's just draft.
Right.
If the policy committee says, no, you're not going to send this, well, then it doesn't go anywhere and the team doesn't have to respond to it. But if there's a desire from the committees to have the project team come and talk about this, I think what you heard today is going to be pretty similar to what you'll hear in any future briefing that they give. So.
Okay.
So just to understand, there's a public comment period open now?
Yes.
Okay, so this would be our opportunity as the MPO to offer comments on this. So all the times that I've been involved in public comment periods, it's just you send off your comments and then they receive them and later on they prepare a public comment response summary. So I wouldn't think we'd be looking at responses back from them right now to all this. Certainly, they'd be happy to come and provide a presentation, work session, all that sort of stuff on the project itself. But for me right now, I think we're just looking at to say, do we think we should have Aaron send this, or are we recommending to the policy committee that Aaron send this as is? And for me, I don't have any suggested edits, changes. I'm fine with them as they are. I'd be happy to move it. But I want to have some comments first.
Well, I guess I forwarded this on to the project team. Obviously, we've got members from the team here. And I'd like to see these, reported as comments from AMAT staff as is, because it's good. It's honest input from staff. And I think there's probably a benefit to getting together with AMAT staff and the project team to kind of walk through all of it, because there's a lot of meat to each one. There's innovation ideas, like you say, and I think it's coming. I'd like to, expand on it, and see what we can do. And so, I know we have the public comment period that I believe ends on April 7th. And so this being, in theory, the AMAT's meeting where we would issue official comments. I think there's opportunities for us to meet and take that input here within the comment period to make sure that those are addressed, whether it gets changed through either actions here today or actions with the policy.
Thanks, Luke. Really appreciate that perspective. We're back to the question of, does anybody have a motion?
I move that we forward on these comments to the policy committee for their review and appraisal.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lyons and by Ms. Keegan. For these comments as written to the policy committee. Any amendments to that motion?
I'd like to add perhaps a number 10 where we request a clarification on the no build, just to provide an opportunity to have that discussion. And I would defer to AMATs to word that in the way that they would see fit.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Good idea.
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Ms. Fullhouse. Are there any objections to that amendment? Okay, hearing none, that amendment passes and is part of the motion. Thank you, Stephen, that's good. Good suggestion. Any other amendments? Okay, hearing none, I guess that puts us, is there any objections to approving the motion as amended? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. As amended. So, everyone follow that comment, and thanks, Galen, for being here and for the project team. And I think that this is part of the process in play, so coming early with ideas that can get darts thrown at it a little bit. Yeah, come up with a better option, so, or clarity, so thank you. Okay, that moves us to the next item on our agenda, which is the AMAT CAC Resolution 2024-001. Actually, item 5C. Who's going to be reading that one? Aaron again.
Okay, I'm filling in for Christine Schutte on the CAC, so.
Okay.
So the Community Advisory Committee met recently with a special meeting to provide comments on the AMAT's TIP Amendment number 2. And at that meeting, they had this resolution that they discussed. So the resolution before you is recommending that Route R, you controlling the, is it up there or is it on your computer at the screen that they can see right there? I want to put up, sorry. I want to put up what Route R is so you all can see it. It's hard to explain this without showing you. I forgot to.
So that's not coming up on ours, Aaron.
We can switch to screen share and you get it up there.
Yeah, it's up there. I just need to find it real quick and then we'll switch it over to.
No?
Okay, so we're getting it on the screen share for everyone online, just a second. Nice end of the so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so before you are on the screen, and let's make sure everybody online can see it.
I see it online.
Okay, cool. So this is Route R from the 2020 Transit on the Move plan that the Public Transportation Department developed a number of years ago. This is a route that's out in Eagle River, Chugach Eagle River area. So the Community Advisory Committee got together and passed this resolution asking for this route to be instated as soon as possible with a couple of modifications. That consideration should be given to extending the route to include Eagle River High School, the native village of Eklutna, and northern communities in some capacity. The CAC is requesting that additional funding be found for this route instead of taking from the existing routes that are already funded in the current system. So they passed this resolution and it is going through the Technical Advisory Committee and the Policy Committee for review and approval before it gets sent out. I have been asked by a number of people if this is appropriate for AMATS to be doing this, because AMATS does not fund transit operations. And I just like to remind everybody about the 2050 MTP, where we did call for more transit routes to be added to the system to help alleviate some of the single occupancy vehicle travel that we have on our system. So it is within AMATS's purview to ask for this, recognizing that we don't have the ability to fund it, but we can help with other things like in transit stop improvements or adding transit stops, lighting, signals, that kind of stuff. So AMATS does have a role to play in this for asking for an additional route to be added to the system. So the resolution is before you for your recommendation to the policy committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Do you have any questions or comments from the committee?
I guess my only question is, I'm not sure who it's going to, because it says now therefore being resolved, the CAC requests that the route be included. But the only people, as far as I know, who can fund this are the Anchorage Assembly. So maybe it should be clarified that the policy committee can't fund this. Can't use our federal funds for M&O as you mentioned, so we don't have any role in funding it. So maybe that clarification could be made in there that we're requesting the assembly to consider this possibility.
So the resolution itself can't be changed because it was approved by the CAC, but we can easily attach a memo to it that says that this would go to the assembly and or public transportation department from the policy committee. So that would be part of what we would bring to the policy committee, a letter or memo that I can write and incorporate in there to give that information.
I know the assembly either just added or was considering adding funding in for another route, and Mr. Rivera added the funds for another route, but he actually added, it's an increase, not a wash, and this is saying try to find additional funding, so it is a zero-sum game over there in transit.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Do we know what other the transit on the move routes are included or aren't currently in operation? I mean, that maybe is the question for Jamie.
Unfortunately, I don't know if we have that identified somewhere about which routes are not. I think most of the routes that are in the transit on the move, they talk about whether they're, yeah.
They haven't been funded, I know, and I believe there were 2 additional ones that went in the MTP that had yet been implemented. Proud part was not.
Okay, so just as I'm thinking systematically, rather than like that project, which this could be interpreted as without knowing some of these details, knowing, you know, if the transit department could choose one route to add on, like what would it be? What would be their their choice, all the things that they can see. As much as I would love people ever to have this additional route, I would, I guess, be interested in seeing how all of those other priorities play in, because that is something that I'm very mindful of. Just how easy it is for certain neighborhoods to raise a concern that they do have a genuine concern. But if it's not looked in the whole context, it does play into that question of priorities and equity. So,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I don't know the document well enough to know, did they prioritize and say, you know, Route R is number 2 or is it number 1? I don't know. I'd hate to go against what they had already done because I know Transit on the Move had extensive public involvement to create that document. I almost feel more comfortable waiting until someone from Transit was able to be here to have this discussion. I think we're kind of doing it in the vacuum here without anybody from Transit. And it's just unfortunate that both Jamie and Bart are on leave and they have the most knowledge of this. I don't know if it's time sensitive, but
It is not time.
I wouldn't say we table it for a month.
yeah.
I know we're postponed until next meeting.
Okay, let's wait on the motion until we give public comment to quick stance. Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, let's move to the public. Are there any comments from the public on this item? See any hands raised online on the audience? Okay, now we're on to the motion, so want to set your motion again?
Move it to the next meeting when Transit can be here to explain.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Mr. Lindenmood, second by Mr. Line to postpone to the next AMAS Technical Advisory Committee. I'm sure that can be here to provide additional perspective and explain.
You probably thought they're getting away with it, not being here, but we'll save it for them.
Are there any objections to the motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion is approved. So that gets us through the action items. Now we're on to the project and plan updates. So we'll start with 6A, the 2024 Cycling Urbanism Masterclass presentation.
It's not me for the next 2 items, so you were lucky. Chelsea, did you want to start with this one or?
Happy to provide a brief background. This is Seward, our AMAT staff.
Before you do, should we shift so that we can see this screen?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not gonna be presenting. Give a background, we were AMAT Complete Streets Plan, funding stream. We were able to fund training for 4 individuals, 2 from the municipality and 2 from DOT to go to Finland to the same training that I attended last February. They went to Helsinki and Oulu. And you remember that Oulu calls itself the winter cycling capital of the world. So pretty neat experience. And I will pass it over to Zach to give this presentation. And then we also have a second presentation, depending on how timing goes. I would love to let Brandon present as well, but I know we also have the Fireweed project team here as well. So just see how it goes.
My name is Zach Hartman. I work in the municipality's traffic engineering department. I think I'm gonna share for my screen here, Chelsea.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I changed some of the presentation to trim it down. I know a few members of the committee and the audience heard us discuss this a couple of days ago at DOT's Complete Streets Plan workshop. So yeah, as Chelsea described, there was an Anchorage contingent that went to Finland, me, Brandon Telford, as well as Noah King and Alex Reed, who were all in the room. So it was very Anchorage focused workshop, which was cool. We kind of got a lot of advice and knowledge tailored to our experience. We started in Helsinki, Finland for a couple days. We biked around, met with some local consultants as well as city staff, city engineering staff. This There's a lot of differences between here and Finland, so I just want to highlight some of the differences in demographics, geography, weather. So this is kind of the highlight of Helsinki compared to Anchorage. They're both similar in that, it's a northern place. Helsinki and Anchorage are both, big cities on the southern coast on a body of water. And generally, I would say that Helsinki kind of has triple the population. The urban cores are kind of the same area, but Helsinki kind of has more buildable area, and their sprawl covers that whole pink metro area with 1.5 million people. Their weather, they're a little bit warmer than us, and they get a little bit less snow than us, so they're kind of just into the range where it'll snow for them, but then it'll melt away a little bit afterwards. You'll kind of see that in some pictures later. But still a very northern place, and snow is commonplace. They're no strangers to it. This slide here highlights the kind of 5 key points that drive their bike plan. One is that all bike routes are direct and efficient, and there's a point that includes intersections and junctions. Their second key point is that all that has to be maintained very well. Number 1 doesn't matter if number 2, the maintenance is there as well. Number 3, we saw in plain sight construction accommodation, their traffic control plans were stellar. There was no doubt where you had to go as a pedestrian, a cyclist, or a driver. It was great. Bike parking, which kind of surprised me that it was so high in the city's priorities, but you saw that everywhere. In their downtown core, where Anchorage has a parking meter, they have a bike parking rack. They're everywhere. You'll see photos of that as well. And then lastly, marketing communications. They're proud of their cycling culture, and they want everyone in Finland and abroad to know it. On the right is a kind of picture of their stated priorities in their 2016 city plan, basically the equivalent of their comp plan. At the top, pedestrians are the most important in their transportation system, followed by bikes, then public transit, then the movement of goods, freight, and lastly is private vehicles. And a quote that stuck with me is the bottom: transit is the backbone of the city in which bicycling thrives. Helsinki really embodied that. You'll see some of their transit mode share a little bit later here. This slide is taken from their bike plan. Once it loads, their bike share is around 10%. It's kind of been going up and down. Second, it's just loading. Apologies. So Helsinki is notable in that they haven't had this infrastructure forever. You can see that the top row of this column in 2012 is when they started putting a focus on bicycling in a lot of their city plans. Far on the left is what their budget was. So back in 2010, they spent 4 million euros on anything bike, ped, sidewalk related. So $4 million or 4 million euros for a city that big wasn't that much. And as they kind of built upon their plans, their bicycle action plan, their mobility plan, that 2016 city strategy I mentioned, that spending increased, and it increased up to about 25 million euros today that they dedicate every year to bicycling projects. And that's a big number, but it's not crazy for a city of 1.5 million people. Something also worth pointing out on this slide is something that's part of their plan is both that bike parking and user satisfaction. They measure that, and that's how they judge themselves, how the public judges them. That funding level I mentioned is high, but again, in my opinion, I don't think that's, a reason that they're so far away from us. This committee, through the policy committee last February, did some shifts to the AMAT's allocation of what percentage goes to the active transportation, non-motorized funding area. So this committee is placing emphasis itself on spending on non-motorized transportation. Helsinki has some lofty goals. Their carbon neutral plan shifted up their 20% bike mode share goal from 2035 up to 2030. And their city bike engineer was definitely sweating it, but the city has also given him the funding to take action and move the needle on this and try and follow that red trajectory. This is mode share throughout Finland. They have a really good study every 6 years all across the country. And in different cities of how people get around. So on the left is what they call sustainable. On the right is passenger car. The second line there is Helsinki. So you can see they have stellar public transit there in light blue. They're like double the nearest city. And then also they really lead in walking, which makes sense, you know, kind of a more walkable core, dense population center. Oulu is 4 lines down. We'll talk about them in a moment, but they are the winter cycling capital of the world. So you can see kind of the light orange there. They lead the way in 16% cycling average throughout the year. And to compare this to Anchorage, I stole these numbers from the base conditions of the AMAT's 2050 MTP. So you see how we stack up a little bit. Definitely less biking and walking, but something I'll point out is that our passenger car, one driver, is not that much different from a lot of places in Finland. We have a lot more people driving together. I don't know, you know, this isn't apples to apples necessarily, but we have a lot more people are going to carpool, Uber, taxi, that kind of stuff. Maybe that's down to how the data was collected, or maybe, you know, when biking, walking, transit are an easier option, those trips can be converted. Mode choice looks a lot different in Finland based on the distance. This one was important to point out because the average trip, the median trip distance on a bike we heard was really super low. Like the median trip distance in Oulu and Helsinki was like somewhere in the 2 kilometer range. And you can see how that shifts here. You know, the biking mode share is the highest in the 1 to 3 kilometer range. So when you're going to be on a bike for less than 15 minutes, people do a lot more of it. Transit really shines in the 7 to 10 kilometer range. And then, you know, once you're above 10 kilometers or like 7-ish miles, people drive their car, a lot like you do here. To represent that mode share, you'll see the Finnish mode share on the left and the equivalent like travel radius mapped onto Anchorage on the right. So with this kind of downtown area, you would expect the Finns to be mostly walking. In a 1.88 mile travel radius, it's a fairly even split. 30% are walking, quarter of people are on transit or a bike, and then 30% in a car. And then it starts to shift pretty quick. In this range, it's mostly transit, and then people driving a car by themselves. And then even bigger, you know, 6 mile radius and beyond, even the crazy Finns, less than 10% of them are walking or biking. The point here is that biking and walking isn't the answer everywhere for everyone, but where it is a smart choice, the infrastructure and the maintenance needs to be there to support that. This is a picture I included of what a bicycle superhighway looks like in Finland. So you can see what it looks like in the summer. We didn't really see any of that. It was a lot whiter, a lot more snow on the ground. And on the left is a map of what they've built so far, including their near-term plans to build that out. What they're doing everywhere is they're taking 8-foot shared use paths and turning it into that right there. That's how they're going to get to 20% mode share. Their city engineer said, you know, we're not perfect in Helsinki. This, you know, doesn't look far different than some conditions you might see in Anchorage where you have to get off your bike and lift it over stuff, but they're making progress. This is an example of a national highway with a dirt, you know, desire path on the left. And in that big pot of funding to increase bike mode share, they just did this last summer, separating bikes and peds from each other, as well as traffic, adding connections to businesses and, you know, pedestrian lighting, and of course the maintenance to go along with it. These are some photos we took to show kind of how like the maintenance. They use graders just like we do. If this video has any chance of playing, which I am doubtful of, we just got a light dusting overnight, so it made the most sense at the time is to hook up a sweeper to the front of that equipment. You know, that should look fairly similar. On the right is that private contractor doing some sweeping, some hand sweeping while the stairs and hand shoveling. Bike signals, there's a cool video in here showing the leading pedestrian interval and leading bike interval they had everywhere so that, you know, pedestrians and bikes start moving before cars do. But there's a lot of this in the city. And then the bike parking that I mentioned earlier. In the situation where there wasn't a good place to put the snow, like in this middle photo here, it ended up on the bike racks. So there's always got to be that space for snow storage. The bottom left photo is a tunnel down to a like 1,000+ bike parking area they're putting beneath their central rail station. So part of their plan to increase mode share. Protected bike lanes weren't very super common. It was a lot of that separated bicycle superhighway. There's the only 2 examples of protected bike lanes that I saw while I was in Helsinki. Steel bollards on the left and parking protected bike lane on the right. They have an excellent bike share system. Right now, it's summer only, as you can imagine. Makes sense. They're trying to expand it to do year round. It's only €35 for the entire summer. Pick up a bike whenever you want. Pretty incredible. Move on to Oulu. Keep it moving. If you have any questions, please stop me, but I don't want to take up everyone's time and give it over to Brandon. Oulu's a lot smaller. They have about 2/3 of the population we do, but they have a very big municipal boundary, a lot like Anchorage. This is kind of a zoom in, scale images left and right of their core. So a denser core, but they get to sprawl a little bit quicker than Anchorage does. Again, highlighting the weather. Their like latitude is similar to Fairbanks, but they're also on a body of water. So their temperature is similar, maybe a little bit colder at different parts of the year and a little bit less snow. A little bit less snow than like a normal year, not unprecedented years. And this is what their bicycle superhighway network looks like. And they're very proud of it. This slide is from their city bike engineer. And yeah, calls themselves the cycling city capital of Finland. They use red aggregate to pigment and dye all their bike lanes. This cross-section width, again, much like Helsinki, they're converting all their 8-foot pathways into 20-foot total. So 8 foot for people walking and then 2 6-foot lanes for folks on bikes. And this is what their city core looks like and what they're building out. So they have 75 more kilometers of that kind of facility planned. 14 of it has been built in the last few years and 16 more in the next couple summers. On that bicycle superhighway network, they have over 330 underpasses. They view that as important for children. More than half of their kids bike to school year round through the depths of winter. They don't notice a decrease in their bicycling numbers, their ridership volume until it gets -20 Fahrenheit. And the reason that is because maintenance is a key for them. They have a separate bicycle only focused contract that goes down those bicycling superhighways. They didn't get there overnight. They've gone through different iterations of the private contract that makes that work. And they had some great lessons that they shared with us. The 11 are all highlighted here, but I won't run through them all with you. To highlight what they do, if there's 2 centimeters of snow on the ground, they need to be plowing immediately. They're 4 centimeters on that bicycle superhighway network is viewed as a failure. So when there's snow ongoing, they're constantly going over the same pathways if they need to. Strict quality control measures in the contract for the amount of slush, the amount of ice, what kind of grip they need to be putting down. They've learned lessons over the years of the kind of QC and monitoring and rules they need to put in the contract to make sure they get the quality that their constituents expect. Lots of technology to support all this, counters everywhere, loops in the ground, as well as cameras that have technology to determine if you're on a bike or walking. And you can see the little eco counter things throughout their network. They also have lasers that measure the amount of snow on the ground that's publicly broadcast. So if you're curious if your route's been plowed yet, you can see on the right this little laser there. This is some of their maintenance equipment. That whole network is done with John Deere tractors. They have a blade on the front and they pull a blower behind that has a second set of blades. And in that photo on the left, you can see that is what all of their superhighway network looks like. And we biked around on kind of like upright touring bikes, narrow tires, like gravel bike width with no studs. And I was like nervous to do it at first, but that's when everyone rode, moms on bikes with their kids, because you don't need it. It is in great condition. Their cycling paths are really well illuminated. That's a standard. You can see the tunnel on the top left. Like I said, it's very important that that is comfortable to be in all year round. So it's really well lit. And their lighting includes these cool projectors when all the markings are covered up. They project which side of the path you're supposed to be on. We asked about, vertical protected bike lanes, and that photo on the bottom right is an example of one they don't really like that much with the big concrete barrier. They have the same problems we do. We don't really know where to put the snow. It kind of just piles up on the barrier, and it's not our favorite. So they look for stuff like something on the left where there is, at grade, more separation, and you have what, 4 or 5 feet there to start piling up snow. Or on the top right, just build a separate bridge. Different story on that. Excellent wayfinding everywhere. Like our highway system, their bike routes are named and have a number. So if finish, you can really get around. And closing up here, this is the little bicycling fleet we were on. The city owns these really nice cargo bikes, so we're all able to jump on bikes. They do it for site visits and things like that. Last slide here, points 1 and 3, I think really are worth highlighting, kind of the takeaway points. Winter maintenance isn't just something that they have to do to get a bare minimum service, keep people moving. They really view it as a customer service business. And tied with that, point number 3, every dollar they put in, they kept calling it an investment. It wasn't how much things cost or how much they're spending, it was how they're investing in their maintenance. I really like the way they viewed it. And that's about all I had. I will play this video for time. I think Brandon might have some more information on how we can, tie all this fun stuff I showed you here to the Anchorage context and how it'll form kind of our path forward.
Zach said, my name is Brandon Telford. I'm the manager of the technical services section at PM&E. Also wear the active municipal engineer at the moment. For those of you who aren't familiar with the project technical support section, we're design, survey, and geotechnical. I oversee all 3, but survey and geotechnical each have a manager, an additional manager, and so I directly manage the design group. And as manager of the design group, I am responsible for the design criteria manual and standard specifications for the city. And as I went on this trip and observed the infrastructure, I really had a mind towards what's in our standards and kind of what's in their standards is going to be different than ours. So I did a lot of comparing and contrasting between the two. And I wanted to share that sort of thought process in this presentation. Much of the media that I acquired personally is snow conditions. So it was really hard to see everything that's there. So I've stolen a lot off of the internet to kind of better reflect what the true vision is. So starting off with both Olu and Helsinki, when you go to their traffic pages on their city websites, you'll find cycling included as just a standard mode of transportation, which is a bit of a shift, I think. I think the most likely place you're going to find cycling information on a local website is going to be on like a Parks and Recs website or some sort of recreational website as opposed to a traffic or transportation related website. But as I was riding around the Bana cycle network, much of which is separated from roadways, it really reminded me of our Greenbelt travel network in a lot of ways. And there were elements of it that really felt like sort of being here time to time. Some of that network, the network's showing there on the left for Olu, some of that network is along roadways. I'm missing the same right away, separated by like a vegetated separation. And some of it's even attached directly to the side of the road, like the back of the sidewalk. But much of it, especially what they exposed us to, much of it felt a great deal like our Greenbelt Trail network, which is reflected a little bit in our existing bike school network image from our AMAT's non-motorized plan. So just 2 pictures to put side to side with the infrastructure in Olu and the infrastructure in Anchorage. You can observe theirs is a little bit wider, but they've also provided designated spaces for people to recreate in or to transit in. You got the spot for the walkers and this space for the cyclists. Additionally, they really prioritize underpass infrastructure, and they do put a lot of thought into that. There was a photo from Zach's presentation of the tunnel. I think they're sort of systematically going through and sort of upgrading that type of infrastructure to the underpass infrastructure. It feels more inviting, allows in more light, makes people feel more secure, particularly much of that infrastructure being used for kids to feel going to and from school. We're starting to see some of that infrastructure. I couldn't find a picture of it, but Martin Luther King Avenue, there's a trail connection that goes underneath that roof, and it has underpass similar to the old style one. It includes additional space for wildlife passage as well. So if you ever experience that, that's a very comfortable overpass or underpass when you compare it to the typical trail or the tunnel underpass that we see. So they certainly have more than one standard for their trails. They go down narrow. We probably rode some that were in the 6 to 8 feet width, but their high order trail is 20 feet. So I put together a quick table of what's called for in our design criteria manual. We have a chapter 4, which is dedicated to trails. And that width varies from 5 to 12 feet. So we don't have anything. I would say typically our standard is the 10 foot, and then the highest traffic areas we go to 12. But we don't have anything that compares to their 20 feet currently. And then their winter maintenance, obviously that's something that they take a great deal of pride in and major focus for them. When you compare their separated trail network that they plow for cycling and walking to our separated trail network, in the wintertime, we have tendency to groom most of ours. Smoke Parks, and apparently a couple of Ship Creek, and there's one other that's plowed. But aside from the exception, a few plowed ones, most of them are groomed. Shows a great surface for skiing, and in the right condition, it makes a good surface for fat tire biking and potentially sometimes even walking, but it's kind of hit or miss depending on the weather, time of day. This time of year, it starts to get softer as the sun shines on it. It becomes more difficult to pass on it. And then also over time, it becomes rutted and it's potholed just from use. It has to be, if you can get there right before they groom it, really difficult with all the bumps. And if you get there right after, also it's real difficult because the snow's soft until it sets up. So there's a lot of drawbacks, a lot of compromises to having that network groomed as opposed to plowed. That being said, Olu actually has a ski trail network that they groom. And so think about that in terms of skiers. That's their trail network that nobody's biking or walking on. And it's free for them to ski on. And then for everybody else, they have a plowed network that gets them where they want to go. And they're expanding their ski network similar to how they're expanding their cycling network, continuing to build and expand on that network as well. I only have a couple slides related to Helsinki. This is one of them. They do have similar infrastructure to Oulu, and I compared it. I kind of consider our coastal trail to kind of be one of our sort of downtown trails. And Helsinki seems like more downtown or denser area. So you picture that sort of infrastructure serving our downtown as well. And then side paths. As I mentioned, some of the trails are along roadways. And I tried to grab a picture of a roadway from Anchorage where I could get a good view off Google Earth of the side path in Anchorage. We do have some separated site paths that provide some quality infrastructure, but they aren't quite what right there. No, obviously, that sort of infrastructure would be location specific. We wouldn't build out something that size on every street in town. It'd be part of a big network that connects people. And then how the side paths are maintained, Olu has that standard maintenance. They do with their John Deere tractors, with the plow in the front and the blower in the back. We have something similar, a little smaller scale, just the blower. So there's some similarities there, between how our side paths are maintained and how theirs are. I think in terms of the standard for the maintenance, though, there's quite a bit of difference. But we tend to have a plow out, once it's triggered, then we have the equipment go through cover every surface once to get the snow removed, and then they go back to the shop, and start the hauling operation. Hauling operation's done until it snows again, regardless of what happens in between versus their operation. They're constantly kind of on the hook. If there's snow drifts or any other sort of condition that comes along with icing or anything else to stay on top of that maintenance all the time. Olu in particular, really, they emphasized separation as being a key to their maintenance. Things that they pointed out as being, a big advantage to providing separation of the snow, the ability to store snow, not necessarily have to haul it, and then the drainage control it provides them the ability to place the snow in a place where when it does melt, it doesn't necessarily melt across the paths and create a placing issue or icing issues in the path. Further discussions on separation, some of the things that as I sort of reflected on it, there's a lot of talk about the comfort of non-motorized users, and I think that separation adds a great deal of comfort. There's also the safety element of it being further away from vehicle traffic. So the number of curb cuts and transitions, we have no separation along the side path that's attached to the back sidewalk. It has to go up and down. Every curb cut, every time you have a driveway or intersection, we set that pathway back. You can eliminate many of those curb cut transitions and provide a more smooth surface. And then there's infrastructure that can be placed inside that separation, including green stormwater infrastructure, vegetation, or other infrastructure to kind of clean the stormwater up. Could be a benefit of providing additional separation. Disadvantages, obviously the wide right of way, potentially to acquire property acquisitions in order to get the separation along the roadway. It tends to be a reason why some of our roadways don't provide separation that's shown in mass or ECM. There's also the question, there's a real distinct difference between Oulu and Helsinki being a much denser city that's much more strapped for land. And also, their right of ways are fronted by historic buildings, hundreds of years old. And the right of ways that man on their right of ways includes the transit, the walking, the cycling, and the driving. And so there was less of a focus on separation there. All those limitations, and the heavier focus, I think, on providing a higher level of service, hauling more frequently, spending more to get the snow out of the right of way as opposed to providing the space within the right of way to store it. And then the one disadvantage that was pointed out actually in blue was that separation can reinforce the idea that the road space is for cars specifically and excludes every other use. So how separation is a key to winter maintenance. repairing, kind of placing a bike path between a curb inlet or at the side of a curb where there's an inlet, and then placing something like a buffer or some sort of protection between the bike lane, it could be parking even. That ends up with the snow being stored kind of next to the bike lane and kind of upstream of the bike lane, so as it melts, you get that glaciation across that infrastructure as opposed to the quality of graphics, by the way. As opposed to the separated where you can place that snow between the pathway and the travel way and slope everything towards the drainage and sort of eliminate the snow melting across the pathway and causing the glaciation, those icy conditions. Quick slide on sort of segueing downtown. Downtown more dense, and that shows in Helsinki, and it also showed in Oulu because in the plan from the 1970s that their transportation plan that established the big bike network originally and started expanding it. The downtown was left out of the plan, and so they don't have the cycling facilities in their downtown. There's a distinct difference in the plan that Oulu's putting together for dealing with cycling in their downtown and the plan that Helsinki's putting together. And actually one of the transportation folks in Oulu said downtown was actually the worst place in town to bike. But their plan for downtown in Oulu was shared facility, so expanding sort of shared facility network where bikes, peds, and vehicles like very low vehicle, low speed conditions exist, and creating shared roads as opposed to dedicated cycle bike lane type infrastructure versus Helsinki, where they were planning, we call it Dutch style or Copenhagen style on-street bike infrastructure there. So kind of the comparison between the Oulu's plans is actually one of their shared streets that currently exists in their plan for addressing cycling infrastructure downtown is just to expand that network versus Helsinki is on the right, some photo from Helsinki where they've installed on-street bike facilities. And then I wanted to throw a quick comparison to Anchorage. We do have bicycle boulevard in our downtown. It's looks like what's on the right there, and that's compared to a picture I took there a little similar street and how they've approached it. So sort of open-ended question. I think all of these sort of comparisons are just sort of meant to be open-ended questions. What are we doing downtown, or what are we doing in Anchorage? Specifically, there's a lot of guidance out there, a lot of different approaches to take. Much of the guidance, particularly what I would refer to as like the North American guidance, is bike lanes sort of cycling as an extension to some degree of the vehicle traffic. But there are other alternatives where there's more separation. The bikes are given us less vehicle oriented, space to operate in. And some sort of upcoming opportunities to sort of influence kind of the future of what Anchorage streets or Anchorage transportation network like. Include the mass, we've got the complete streets plan, and we have MOA planning is doing the right of way plan. Parks and Rec has a recreational trails plan, and then there P&E, we're gonna be going through a series of design material updates in the future. So I just wanted to point out that, we can take some of what we've seen and we can kind of look at our network and kind of come up with opportunities to kind of improve where we can. That's the question. So.
My question, when you showed, thank you both for your presentations. They were really, really informative, and I feel like as much as I could, got transported to the place. But the one that I was curious about was the side by side of the John Deere and the trackless. And so I just wanted to clarify, their winter maintenance strategy is to plow and then remove that snow. It's not to just blow it to the side.
No, they just move it to the side.
They do.
In the
Okay.
storage areas. The plow on the front allows them to move what they can with the plow, and then the blower actually, further removes the snow, so that what falls back in the plow is then picked up by the snow blower.
I see.
And then it also eliminates the tracks of the plow, so they don't leave any, tire tracks behind. They also have a specialized blade on both the plow and the snow blower that puts those grooves in the snow that's left behind instead of just removing all the way down the asphalt. They found that those grooves provide a more stable surface than just going straight to asphalt.
Did you get a quote on one?
Exactly.
Meg was actually there, Meg's out of town, she was getting numbers. But
Oh,
I just
she
want to
was.
point out, they do haul as well, so when those areas get full of snow, they haul them off to snow dumps, and they have snow dumps just like they.
Yeah, cool. Cool, because the trackless, they're expensive, and they break often, which I think we all see, but yeah, look, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
And the plows serve a purpose or the tractors serve a purpose somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, most of them are completely unmodified. Some of them they have to make a little bit shorter to fit in those underpasses, but yeah, just things you can use year round.
We do throw mowing decks on our trackless machines. I don't know what happens to street maintenance trackless, but we at Parks do use ours year round. So I just would be interested to see those side by side costs though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Zach and Brandon, I really appreciate it. I did go to the winter cycling congress in Edmonton and met a lot of the guys from Finland. And also talked to those from Finland, and Edmonton actually uses their rec staff for the summer, and those are the ones who do the bike maintenance in the winter. So kind of interesting, good opportunities to learn from your communities. Let's see, so are there any questions and comments from the community or any comments from the public on that item?
James.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, James Dorothy, DOT Planning. It really strikes me in these presentations that the number one thing that both these communities came back to is the maintenance side. It does not matter how good your facilities are designed, how many you have. If they're not maintained, it's not worth it. And I really feel like these discussions and what we know of our own community really point to the thrust not being so much as where are we going to put shared pathways or lanes, as much as how are we going to find the way to maintain these adequately so people can actually use them. We spend a lot of time talking about the design and the siting. But federal funding being what it is, it's a lot easier to build than it is to maintain. And so it really strikes me that the focus really has to, even though we do have the ability to fund projects and build projects, we need to be much more mindful of that maintenance side, or it's just money down the drain.
Perfect, thanks, James. So we're gonna move over to talk about Fireweed. And I guess the one last thing I want to say about that is I did meet the guys from Finland. And the thing that they are working on too is how do we design it so that maintenance is easier? So that is a key question. And I think Fireweed is probably a perfect project to ask that question on. How can we design Fireweed so that we can better maintain the road and pedestrian facilities? So we have that opportunity right now as a project is about to happen. So we'll move then on to item 6B on the agenda. Is 15 minutes enough for you?
Yeah, we'll talk fast. We're somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. We'll go as fast as we can. Answer any questions you can. I'm Alex Reed. I am the project manager with DOT for the Fireweed Lane Rehabilitation Project. We're just getting this project kicked off, so it's very early. We're starting off with preliminary design and our environmental process and a pretty heavy public involvement process as well. Project limits for this is Fireweed from Seward Highway to Spinard. Right now, the roadway is split as far as maintenance and ownership between the MOA and the state. At the completion of the construction of the project, it will be a solely MOA road maintained and operated. Obviously, the funding for this project is AMATS funding, so that's federal funding, so we'll be following the federal process as we design the project. The team is made up of several partners. We teamed up with MOA, obviously. We have a counterpart there that's a project manager as well, Russ Oswald. Also on our team is Dow, who's doing our public involvement and traffic analysis. Hiddleston, who's doing our active transportation traffic analysis. And Lounsbury, who is leading up the design. And with me is Joe Taylor, the project manager from Lounsbury, who's going to give an update of where we're starting the design.
So our presentation today is not nearly as visually cool as the last one. We're actually here without a presentation, and we're here without a presentation on purpose. And so, as Alex just said, our team is just barely engaging and getting the project off the ground. And right now, we're going out to 4 or 5 community councils. We're about halfway through that. We've got about maybe 2 or 3 more presentations to make. And the message we're delivering to the councils and the public is that we're here without a presentation because we haven't drawn a line. We're trying to introduce the project, open up the dialogue, get contact information out there, and then talk about the issues that we know about and get the conversation going about the issues that we don't. So Alex touched on a number of points here, and I'm just going to kind of reiterate the messages that we're bringing to the public right now. The first one being the owners and the processes. So we're highlighting very much that this is a project through AMATS, being led by DOT in partnership with municipality. And so that means a number of things that we're trying to explain. And so the first being a federally funded project, we're letting the public know that we're subject to a couple of laws that we have to follow. And we're going to talk about that a lot over the next couple of years. The first being the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. We'll hear a lot about that. That governs the alternatives process, things we must do, things that we might have to look at. And the second law that the project has to follow is the Uniform Relocation Real Property Assistance Act, or the Uniform Act that we talk about. And that gives us some rules about impacts to private property. We'll put some sideboards on it. So reminding everybody that we have to follow those 2 laws. But because this is portions of it are an MOA road, the intent is that this will be an MOA. We also have to follow MOA's processes. And so the third piece that we're reminding folks is the context sensitive solutions piece. And most folks seem to be fairly familiar with that. But this project will be satisfying that simultaneously with NEPA. That's going to mean that we have to go to planning and zoning and get approval, go through UDC and follow those processes as well. So we're just trying to introduce folks to those concepts, talk about the 2 laws of process. About on the limits, it's the entirety of Fireweed Lane. And then I'm going to read to you, I want to use the same words. We're trying to be very careful to use the same words every time we go out about kind of the purpose of the project. So we're describing this as Department of Transportation, the MOA, proposed to rehabilitate Fireweed Lane to bring the roadway and non-motorized facilities up to current design standards. By doing that, the project team will analyze and design alternative roadway configurations to rehabilitate Fireweed Lane to improve motorized active transportation needs, as well as business circulation and access on the corridor. So our takeaway there for folks, we want everybody to understand there's a certain number of motorized vehicles on the corridor. We have to address those. There are, I believe, 91 businesses that front the corridor. So access to businesses, I think we have 125 driveways. Business access is incredibly important. But also pedestrian and non-motorized users and active transportation needs are almost non-existent on the corridor. And so that's the third major constituent that we have to consider when we're looking at the project. We're introducing folks right now to the project strategy, and the way that we're talking about this is that the project is going to consider 3 families of typical sections. So the first family that we're going to be looking at, and the first lines that we're going to draw and start showing folks, is a 4-lane typical section. A 4-lane typical section has basically 2 variances to it. One is a true, we're not going to do anything, no build typical section, just leave it alone. We're going to ask the question whether or not that meets the purpose of the project. So we're going to analyze a no build. As a federal rehabilitation project, we're also going to analyze the second 4-lane alternative, which is to just simply rehabilitate the existing project. So we'll look at repaving, restriping, updating signs, rehabbing it in place. We're going to go seek public input on that, and then we're going to evaluate whether or not that meets the purpose. So those are kind of our 4 lanes. The second family that we're looking at, and we're looking very hard at, is a 3-lane set of sections. And so that a 3-lane conversion from 4 to 3, the existing facilities of 4 lanes, to convert that down to 3, preserve space on the outside under like a road diet technique is the words that we're using. So very similar to Spenard Road and other roads here in town. We know a lot about road diets. They're implemented all over the country. And what we're telling folks is our starting place for 3-lane typicals, we have 3 that we're going to start with. And we're going to roll out and show. 2 can be found in the non-motorized form, the AMAS non-motorized form. There's some very detailed, very specific 3-lane conversions in there. And we're going to look at both of those in great detail. There's also a design criteria manual set of recommendations for a 3-lane conversion. So we're going to see that. Those are the 3 that we know that we're going to be starting with. It doesn't mean that they're the only 3 that we're going to look at, but there's the first lines that we're going to show. And then the final family that we're going to be talking about is 2-lane typical sections. So we're going to analyze converting the 4-lane facility to 2 lanes and see what we may or may not be able to do with that additional space, the savings of the space there. So that's got a lot of attention as we've been out talking to folks right now. And obvious benefits to 2-lane that people are asking, why would we do that? You get a bunch of space. So we would preserve space for converting utilities, adding bike facilities, adding pedestrian facilities. You go from 4 to 2, you have a lot of space. Access is obviously the immediate concern. So how do we get in and out of businesses? Those are the things that we're doing. So we're going to analyze them. The place that we're going to start is in the Seward corridor plan. So that plan draws a number of 2-lane sections, and they apply them from Fireweed to Fireweed. So we're certainly going to look at that in that plan. We're going to ask whether or not those are applicable to the rest of the project. So that's our starting place on the 2 lanes. So 4, 3, and 2 are the families that we're talking about. Our primary source documents right now are the design criteria manual, the Spenard corridor plan, and the non-motorized plan. Those documents are linked to our website, which went live 2 days ago. It's on fireweedlane.com. So we're just out with that. The last things that we're saying, schedule-wise, we're telling folks right now that final design could be as fast on a really fast schedule as 2028. Pretty much everything would have to line up and go perfectly for that. And construction would come after final design, and of course, that funding is not in place that far out. Realistically, 2029, 2030 is probably more probable on the schedule. And so I mentioned the website, fireweedlane.com. That's the last thing. That's the newest part of the project. You can get anybody on the project team from that. With that, just any questions or comments anyone has for us.
Okay, are there any questions or comments from the committee? You're gonna come back and sit back up? Are there any, thanks for coming and giving the presentation. It's always cool to hear. I guess one question I have is pilot studies. Is that something that you're anticipating, considering, or how might those fit into it?
Yeah, so we have, as you know, there's a pilot project that's also going on simultaneously. And one of the corridors they were considering this pilot, there were potential issues with conflicting with what we were doing with the project. So what we did, requested clarification from FHWA, whether we use or design funds pre-environmental document to do our own pilot. If there was a typical section we chose where there was value to it, and we can. So there's a typical section that we select and we want to test it out, we can use their design funds to do that. So it is definitely an option.
Sounds good. Let's see, so it is 2:56, and we're getting pretty close on time. We do have, I guess, are there any public questions or public comments on this? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much, Joe and Alex. Really appreciate it. So we've got 4 minutes left. We've got committee comments, public comments. Is there any interest in extending or trying to wrap up in that time? Okay, yeah, sounds good. So we'll move on to, is there any general information? Okay, perfect. So item 8 on the agenda is any committee comments? Any comments for members of the committee? Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Just a reminder that we got the Anchorage Transportation Fair coming up here March 28th, from 3 to 7, Alaska Airlines Center. So hopefully folks can make the trip down there. A lot of good project presentations, and you'll be down there. A lot of different entities presenting what we have coming up here in Anchorage. So hope people can make time.
Perfect. Thanks. So that is one of the best ways to find out all the different projects that we want. Traffic engineering department, it does have a Vision Zero coordinator position. It's just about to open, probably in a week or so. So if anybody wants to come work my department doing Vision Zero, now would be your opportunity. So keep an eye out for that. And the other item is that the Anchorage Protected Bike Lane Pilot Project's website is live. So look up anchoragepbl.com for information on the downtown Protected Bike Lane Pilot Project. Got a lot of good information on there, some ways to engage, comments to provide. You can zoom in and see the design, kind of what we're doing with that. So pretty exciting to have that moving along. Any other committee comments? Go ahead, Ben.
I will say that the STIP has been submitted, was submitted last Friday to Federal Highways for their approval. They typically take 30 days or so to approve, so hope to see an approval.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you, Ben, for that. Any other committee comments?
PME is working on the 2024 construction project map, so we'll get your projects into Donna Grafton's group. Working on that, and she put a cutoff date of like mid-March, but I let her know that I haven't even set a date yet, so maybe some of that date can slide. And in any case, get your projects from parks and internal MOA projects and DOT projects to Don Brecken.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Other comments? Okay, any public comments? We got about 1 minute if anybody would like to make a comment. Or were you gonna make a comment, Steve? I see you came online.
Yeah, you talking to me, Brad? I'm sorry.
Did you have a comment to make?
I did. I just wanted to share that this morning, way early our morning, but morning in Washington, D.C. Today was the day for the final oral arguments in the municipality's lawsuit against the Maritime Administration for the old intermodal expansion project. So all of the court-related back and forth is done. It's in the hands of the 3-judge appeals council, and we're standing by now to hear what the results are. My understanding from the folks back in DC was it went very well for us, but it's the court system, so you never know. But this brings to a close a 12-year effort that's been going on to recover from what was left a mess for those of us here at the port. So we're pretty excited to see it coming to an end.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Steve. Looks like with that, we're at 3 p.m. So we're adjourned.